Hi, Mark.
Hello.
Hey.
Am I on? Am I on? Hello?
Yep.
Oh, good.
So Mark is a technology executive, an entrepreneur who has worked at 4 successful startups. Most recently, Mark was the CEO of Zite, which he sold twice, to CNN in 2011, and then from the CNN to Flipboard. So congratulations
Thank you.
for selling twice.
And actually, I'm no longer executive. I'm unemployed now, so to be
All right.
clear.
We have some scheme for unemployed people here in Slovenia, so you're welcome to stay here.
Oh, fantastic. Maybe I won't leave.
So prior to Zite, Mark was the product manager at the 3 search startups, Sidestep, Cosmix, and PowerSet. Through the Microsoft acquisition of PowerSet, Mark worked as a program management leader for the PowerSet office of Bing. So Mark is currently advising, investing in startups as he looks for the next big opportunity. Okay, he's unemployed. So Mike, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. See if this works. Oh, perfect. Okay, hi everybody. My name is Mark Johnson. I think that I had one of the longest journeys to get here. I started traveling on Monday morning, California time. I was at 4 different airports. It took me about 30 hours to get here, and I got in around midnight last night. So forgive me if I'm a little slow this morning. But I'm feeling pretty good. I had a cup of coffee or two, so I'll try to tell my story. I'm really excited to be here. This is my first time in Central Europe, and I'm really excited to tell you the story of Zite. I guess it's called the Entrepreneurial Rollercoaster, and I think probably for good reason. Us entrepreneurs, the journey is never linear. It's never simple. And my goal here is to give you a flavor of what it's like to be an entrepreneur in the US, to give you a flavor of what it's like to sell a company, to give you a flavor of what it's like to launch a product. Now, what I don't want to give you here is just simple advice. I think that we all as entrepreneurs, we chart our own path. And what I want you to take from this is some stories and some lessons, and ask a lot of questions of me. I'll be around later, so please, come to me. But I'm going to tell you the story of Zite, and hopefully you'll get something out of that. So who am I? I have the unique position of actually having sold a company twice. It may be the case that I will sell a company again in my life, but it's very unlikely, I think, that I'll sell it twice. After I became CEO of Zite, we sold it to CNN in about 6 months, and I'll go through that entire story. And then we incubated it within CNN for about 2 years, and then eventually sold to a competitor named Flipboard. This time I did not go along, and that's why I'm unemployed right now. Although in the US we like to call it fun employment because it turns out like it's a lot of fun when you've sold a company and then you're unemployed. So how did I get here? I mean, I think a curious thing is how do you become a CEO, right? What is it that makes a CEO? Well, I came through actually a very traditional path for this Silicon Valley, which is to become a product manager. So we always like to joke that a product manager is the CEO of his product. So I sort of have an addiction with search startups, as you can see. I work for Sidestep, which is a travel search engine, which sold for about $180 million to another travel search engine called Kayak. And then I worked for a company called Cosmix, which sold for about $300 million to Walmart. Now, both of those, I was a product manager prior to them selling, so I didn't end up at those companies. Now, a third one was PowerSet. It was a natural language search engine, and our goal was to read every single page on the web and have a deep understanding of it. We went about that for about 2 years. We built a product in Wikipedia, and then we sold to Bing, so Microsoft's Bing, and I spent about 2.5 years there. And that's really where the story of Zite begins. So I told you I wasn't going to give you really simple advice, but honestly, I think that if you can give any advice to an entrepreneur, it's right there. Don't give up. I think what a lot of people don't know about Zite is that it's really old. So Zite actually starts long before I became involved. It started in 2006. There were 2 people, Ali Devar, who was a lawyer, and Mike Kloss, who was a computer science grad student at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. And Ali had an idea about sort of searching through legal documents. He brought this to the computer science department. He met a professor, introduced him to one of his really smart grad students, Mike Kloss, and they started having a dialogue. So they got a little bit of money from the Canadian government and from some angel investors and started pursuing this sort of nebulous and vague idea about search. So their idea was that the web was getting too big for search and that you needed something else. That is, we lost the sense of serendipity on the web. If you remember, well, some of you are old enough to remember the days of Yahoo. And one of the cool things about the Yahoo directory was it only had a limited number of things in there. Remember, there were human editors adding pages to the Yahoo directory. But you had this sense of serendipity where you would happen upon some page that was really cool that you hadn't intended to go to. Now, serendipity is the enemy of web search. So if you find a search result if you find a web page in your search results that isn't what you want, that's bad for the search engine. But Mike Kloss and Ali Devar wanted to bring that back. Now, the problem was they had a really vague idea of their product. So they had about 4 engineers working for 5 years on this product, and they built everything in the kitchen sink. There was a search engine. There was a way to save your web pages. There was a way to see what your other friends were reading. And they had this really, really complicated product with really awesome technology underneath. But it was really complicated, never had more than 10,000 users. So I hate the word pivot. This is a great quote from Mike Moritz. Pivot really means a near-death experience. That is, a pivot isn't, oh, my product is okay right now. I think I'm going to do a 2.0 version. No, that's not what a pivot is. A pivot is when you say, wow, I really screwed up for the past few years, and there's some things I want to salvage from this company, but I'm going to change basically everything. And that's actually where I got involved. So I was a product manager at Bing at the time. And these 2 guys from Wario were kind of wondering what to do with this company. They had been doing it for 4 years, really didn't have any users. We actually shared a public relations firm in common. And they knew the story of PowerSet, of how we built this really complicated search technology, sold it to Bing very successfully. And they kept asking questions about this PR firm, which was our PR firm at PowerSet. And they said, hey, you should talk to Mark Johnson. So I became an advisor to Zite. And I think the most important lesson that I learned here was look under the hood. So it turns out when I looked at the Wario product, it was just terrible. I mean, it was complicated. You couldn't figure out what to do with it. But as I talked to the technologists at the company, I realized that there was some really, really powerful technology there. And when you have really powerful technology, it turns out that you can pivot a lot easier than if you're just trying to change the product. Now, what we did was we actually solved a personal problem of mine. So everybody here probably remembers Google Reader. Now, the problem with Google Reader is you come in on a Monday morning and you probably have 999 unread items. So like, oh, wow, I can't read all that. So you mark them all as unread. Then you have a few meetings and you go to lunch and you come back to Google Reader and you have 150 unread items. And you're like, oh, God, I can't read all that. All I really wanted was something to tell me what's really important to read today. I have a lot of varied interests. I like technology, I like astronomy, I like linguistics, I like politics. These are very, very different areas. I don't want to necessarily choose the exact blogs I want to read. I want to read the coolest and most interesting and most fascinating things for me in each of those areas. So what we did is, and remember, this is still while I'm an advisor, we pivoted to this thing called Zite.com. And what's cool about that is search is a pull technology. You type something into a search engine, and then you get something out. What we did with Zite is more of a push technology, which is we know a lot about you. We know what your interests are. We know what you care about. Let's try to push that information to you rather than have you tell us what you want. So we built this, and wow. And I look at this today, and I think, oh, Lord. That's a pretty complicated product. And it turns out that's what the venture capitalists told us too. They said, wow, well, that's interesting, but it's really complicated. So we kind of tail between our legs, think, hey, maybe we have to fold this thing. And now I'm going to use a very American metaphor, which I guess I'm going to have to explain. So in football, the goal of football is to take the ball, and the quarterback wants to throw it down to the other end of the field, and someone on his team catches it in the end zone, and then you get points. So there's this great metaphor called a Hail Mary, which is basically at the end of the game, if you're down by a lot of points, usually you sort of work your way up the field slowly. At the end of the game, sometimes what you do is you just throw the ball, you send all of your people down to the end zone, and you pray to Mary that someone is going to catch the ball. And that's essentially what we did. So the VCs aren't giving us money for the web product. We think we have something there because it works really well if you can actually convince someone to use it. And then the iPad comes out. So what we found about the iPad is we had competitors pop up like Flipboard, like Pulse. And all they really were glorified RSS engines. That is, they were just like Google Reader, only much, much prettier on the iPad. And we thought, you know what? We can do that way better than they can. In fact, we're going to do something that has never been done before. That is, instead of someone subscribing to a publication like TechCrunch, we're just going to have people subscribe to technology. So we looked at millions of articles a day and had thousands of categories, which is much different than anyone else. Basically, at the end of our rope, we had about, say, 8-9 months of money left. I was going to become CEO at some point during this time. We designed the product. I went up to Vancouver and designed it with them. And we launched on the iPad about 6 months later, which means we had, say 2-3 months of money in the bank. This is a real Hail Mary. And we came out with Zite 1.0. Zite 1.0 was basically a product for the iPad that gets smarter as a news reader that gets smarter as you use it. Now, when we launched, we were actually surprised at the response. We thought a really good first month, we thought, 20,000 downloads would be good, 50,000 downloads would be amazing. Well, on the first day, we had 50 unique pieces of news coverage. We were in print in USA Today and the Wall Street Journal. We were #1 in the App Store. And to our surprise, we actually launched the exact same week that the iPad 2 was coming out. Now, these numbers 125,000 downloads in a week probably doesn't sound that big right now. But at the time, remember, there was only the iPad 1 out there. So it was a huge number. And this is a company with over 5 years only had 10,000 users. This is a really exciting day for us. And now I reflect back on, I think, well, why was Zite successful? Like, what was special about that? Like, how had we failed for so many years and then suddenly come up with amazing product market fit? Just, a few guys basically in a room in Vancouver. I mean, I think the first is there's a real problem out there of information overload. I told you about Google Reader. I'm sure you've all had experiences with this where you just have too much to read. The idea behind Zite is that we get smarter as you use it and that we tell you exactly what you need to be reading. And that was a real problem for users, and it really struck a chord, I think, especially with the reporters that were writing about us. I mean, they have that problem more than anybody. They read a lot of news every day. I think it was really smart that we launched on the iPad instead of the web. There's lots of challenges in being a mobile-first company, but we sort of were at the very beginning of that trend, like really before the term mobile-first, or certainly iPad-first, was ever coined. And I think finally, though we had this really powerful underlying technology, we didn't necessarily expose it to the users. It's a really simple product, and you might not know that underlying this, there's all this artificial intelligence that's figuring out what you need to read. Just every time you open the app, there's something there for you. And I think that's really critical, is when you're building a technology company, kind of remembering that at the end of the day, users need to use your product. And it doesn't really matter what the technology does. And frankly, they just don't care about it. Well, so I became CEO around this time. Really excited. I left Bing. I'm, young CEO of this startup. I'm super excited. But it turns out, there we go. Oh, where are we? I forgot about this. I wanted to share some of the stats that we had. So, as you look at Zite, I think one of the most special things about it is how much people used it. So even after 3 years, you never would normally have this number. It's usually month-over-month retention. Still, 25% of our downloads are still using Zite today, which is just unbelievable. The average time on the iPad is over 20 minutes. Typically you only get stats like that with a game like an Angry Birds or something like that. And an average user, think about it. I mean, you're competing with Angry Birds. When you're building a mobile application, you're competing with games. You're competing with reading. Luckily, reading is one of the top things that people do on the iPad, but I mean, to this day, I still look at that and think, wow, I just can't believe that number. And people read an average of 9 articles a day, which also shocks me because even as the CEO of the company and its #1 user, I often didn't read 9 articles a day. So it turns out, though, when I became CEO, I got a quick lesson. Turns out that sometimes you piss people off. And that's okay, because you're disrupting. I remember, this is especially in the media, that this is about 2 weeks after we launched, and we got a cease and desist letter from the who's who of the media world. New York Times, Dow Jones Company, Gannett, all these people, Time Inc., who then later became a sister company of ours with the CNN acquisition, all signed this letter that said, stop what you're doing. And we found a way to satisfy them. But what I love about this is that when I got this letter, when I got the cease and desist, people, we were really worried. We were going into venture capitalists. We were trying to get money. We thought, oh no, this is the worst possible thing that can happen. And I remember going into a top tier venture capitalist, and the first thing they knew about this, they had seen this article, and he slapped me on the back and said, well, Mark, you must be doing something right because the media companies are really angry at you. And I think it's important to remember that if you want to make a cake, sometimes you have to break some eggs. So a very unique position that we were also in was that we needed money badly. I told you about this Hail Mary pass, this pivot. We are running on fumes at this point. Like, sure, we've got 125,000 downloads. Downloads are still rolling in, but the problem is that we're running out of money. So very interestingly, I had a term sheet from a VC on the table, and we had an offer from CNN. So what happened, because of that letter, where the media companies were kind of angry at us, this alerted my boss to the situation, Casey Estenson, who ran CNN Digital, and he called us, and at first it was, hey, you guys are doing something interesting. How can we work with you? Then it was, hey, you're doing something really interesting. Can we take a stake in you? And that translated into, hey, you know what? I think you should be part of CNN. Why don't we just buy you? So we had a really difficult choice of whether we should go to a large company or take some money and try to go at it on our own. And there are advantages and disadvantages to each. Now remember, I had just come out of Microsoft as a product manager, and I had seen the last company, PowerSet, sort of slowly be bled over 2 years, right? Most acquisitions go south, period, right? I mean, even if you look at something like Yahoo, they think about Delicious and Flickr. But I mean, think even more recently, something like Tumblr. I just read the other day in the news that Tumblr's stats have basically been flat or declining since they got bought by Yahoo. It's very, very rare for a company to succeed. However, I had a big advantage. And that was that I had been with Microsoft beforehand, so I knew the right questions to ask. And actually, CNN turned out to be an amazing place to incubate Zite. So we spent about 2 years there, tripled the size of the team, launched multiple products, and I think this is why that I was really frank during negotiations. As an entrepreneur, it's not just about selling your company because you want to put some money in your pocket. That's not why we're in this business, right? We're in this business because we're passionate about what we do. I think that Zite is really important. We're helping people to learn things. We're helping people to get information that they would otherwise never have. So for me, it's not just about the money that CNN is going to give us. It's not about the check that they're going to be writing. This is about my product. This is about my baby. So I really was honest with them during these negotiations because I wanted to make sure that that they were going to preserve this thing that I thought was really important. So we tried to figure out shared goals and objectives. We had milestones that we had to agree upon, like what is it that we're going to do over the next year. And my experience in the bad acquisition, I really talked to my boss in such a frank way that he really believed me and trusted me. Now, I think that we had certain other advantages with CNN. For example, we were in San Francisco and headquarters is in Atlanta, so you're basically completely across the country, and distance is useful for that. The other thing is that CNN had never done an acquisition before, so this was new territory for them. So Microsoft, Yahoo, they do dozens of acquisitions every year typically, whereas CNN had never, as far as they could tell, CNN had never done a technology acquisition before. So in one sense, they were learning as much from them, or as much from us as we were from them. We certainly got advantages from CNN. So things like finance and HR, those back office operations, which frankly for a startup are usually not any fun, were all taken care of by CNN. So lots of huge advantages. I think guaranteed funding is really important. So we were running out of money with Zite, and when you're running out of money, it forces you to do things that you might not otherwise do. Sometimes those are great, like forcing us to launch on the iPad. Other times they're not so great because you make decisions based on money. But with CNN, we were guaranteed to have a check coming into us. One thing that I was particularly focused on, and I knew this was critical to success, was the first 100 days. I knew during the first 100 days I needed to do a few things. I needed to show the outside world that Zite was going to survive within CNN. I mean, our customers, when we got by CNN, they were despondent. They were depressed. They were like, you know what? You're going to be around 6 months, and then I'm going to have to find a new way to read my news. So I wanted to make sure that we showed the outside world that we had done something. So we launched the iPhone within about 100 days of launch. I also knew it was really important to hire people, and we'll talk a bit about this more later about the culture. But we hired some people, we got the team running, and we felt like a whole new company within CNN. So that was really exciting to kind of see this company grow. So, how do you build a great culture? One of the things I was most worried about at CNN, this is another thing that I was very honest with during the process, was how do I hire and attract great people? At a startup, especially a small startup, your people are everything, right? These are the people who generate your product ideas. These are the people who are going to build your product. These are the people who you live, eat, sleep, and work with, right? I mean, you're with these people all the time. So, how do you build a great culture? I think that one of the things that we did was obviously hire for intelligence and capability, right? I mean, no one wants to work with someone who's dumb or can't do their job. And that's just like table stakes. But my job at the end was, I'm not a developer, so I can't determine whether someone is going to be good at their job or not. What I can determine is, should this person work here? We actually added another sort of check at the end after me. So I would sort of check and make sure that there was like cultural fit. But then we took this person out with a team. Remember that it's not just about working together. You're going to be playing together. Teams that play together stay together. And I think that was really important for us to sort of make this final check to make sure that this is a person not just that we want to code with, but this is a person that we want to hang out with. Because a lot of times those hangout sessions where you're just having a beer together are when you have the best ideas, when you have the best bonding. So I think that it's important to remember that you want to have smart people, but you also want to have people that fit in. And I think that the most important reason for doing this, and this is true for startups who can offer stock options, as well as big companies, which is punch above your weight. You want to hire the best of the best. My lead iOS developer, she came from Apple, and I was able to get her to come and work for Zite. And one of the reasons we were able to do that was we presented a unique culture, a unique opportunity for her to grow and learn new things. And if you don't tell employees that, then you're really missing out on this unique aspect of startup culture. So one of the things we also did within CNN is because we had this guaranteed funding and because we had a lot of freedom, we were allowed to take big bets. So we actually rewrote the entire product. So you saw the product earlier. It was very sort of iPad 1.0 in a lot of ways. And we rewrote the entire product from the ground up. So that original product was built, it was essentially all HTML5. There was a small wrapper around it, but it was basically web pages that were rendered on the iPad. We spent a lot of time making that snappy and smart, so making it very fast, but we were missing something. We were missing sort of that connection to the iPad. That sort of deep connection within iOS. So we decided to, and we also realized, when we built the product originally, we had 6 months. That's it. You can only do so much user testing. You can only learn so much. So we made a lot of product mistakes. And we decided to correct some of those. Like one of the big ones was people didn't discover new categories a lot. So we had, at the time, about 2,500 categories. With Zite 2.0, we had 40,000 categories, and people never found them. So people would add 11 categories to their quick list on the side, and then they would never change that. So one of the things we did in Zite 2.0 is we wanted to make sure that your discovery experience never ended. You were always finding new categories. You were always finding new things to read, and we wanted there never to be a dead end. There were a lot of dead ends in the original Zite, so we took this big bet and we rewrote the entire thing. Now, good things and bad things came out of this. Good things, such as all of our stats went up, and that's good. But our star rating and our users revolted. So within a week of launching this product, we always had 4.5, 5 stars in the App Store. When we launched this, we were down to 1.5 stars, which the mood in the office was terrible. So we learned a lot of things about kind of relaunching a product. One is sort of you need to know when to revamp it, right? You need to realize you're doing something big here, right? You're not just sort of, oh, let's fix a bug here, or users have been requesting this. You're talking about changing a lot of things at once. And frankly, that means users are going to revolt a little bit. So I think the one thing that we realized is there should be a dot release quick on the heels of your 2.0 release. That is, listen to your users, figure out some of the things that they were complaining about, and fix them right away. Another thing that we learned here was we had built Android sort of quickly. It was because of the acquisition, we sort of made a roadmap, and Android was on the roadmap, and we wanted to follow the roadmap. And as we started building Android, we realized, oh crap, we're building on Android, but we're making all the same mistakes on Android that we had made on the original iPhone and the original iPad. And that was a mistake. We should have just gotten it right on iOS and then transferred it to Android or transferred it to other platforms. And that was a real mistake that we made, but it's learning. Another thing important that we learned with this release that we had never done before is coordinating marketing across all channels. As you go and think about launching an app, I can tell you your 3 best friends in the world. They're Google, Amazon, and Apple, right? In the old world, it was great to get PR. Like if you were building a web page, get PR, get people to link to your homepage, and you will get traffic. In the new world, all that matters is promotion in the App Store. And working really closely with Apple was really critical to the success of Zite 2.0. So despite our users being skeptical of it, we worked really closely with Apple and took a lot of their feedback. We had a lot of fans within Apple. And we took a lot of their feedback on the product of what would make it look more iOS-y, what would be more in accordance with their UX principles. And we made a lot of changes to the product based on Apple. And I think for good, because the week that we launched, we were featured by Apple on the top of the App Store, and more so than anything else we did in marketing, that really affected us positively. So a few more things, and then I'm going to open up for questions if we can. So also, as you're building a product, it's not just about the UX. It's not just about the user experience. Your user experience is really driven by the underlying technology. So we had this extremely powerful recommendation engine underneath. Again, looking at millions of articles a day, and then filtering those millions of articles down to a couple hundred that you want to read. Now, what we realized was that if we just focus on the technology, just ignore the product entirely, just focus on the underlying technology, that is, focus on getting better recommendations to people, we thought there was some upper bound on how many articles that users could read. It turns out that basically over the course of the year, we had almost a 40% increase in article views per user, which is really impressive. And some of these changes are driven by the user interface, but most of them are just driven by the underlying data, that is delivering better recommendations to people. So I think that an important lesson here is that your UX is really important, but what underlies that UX in a lot of ways is even more important, and that at the end of the day, people want a product that's delivering them really good results. So another thing that happened sort of as we went through this process was we made some mistakes. And the biggest one was our logo. I'm almost embarrassed to put this on stage now, but we switched our logo to this owl, which we named Ibu, which I guess is French for owl. And our users just hated him. I mean, it is hard to express how painful it was to read the user reviews on the iTunes store after this. I mean, people hated his eyes. They were like, I can't even open this app anymore because he's so ugly. I mean, it was really painful. And we had spent, frankly, a lot of money on this logo too. And oh my Lord, oh God, I can't even look at it. But what we did was we cleaned up after it. Make mistakes, clean up after them, and just don't make them again. So in this case, what we did was, with the dot release, we eliminated this, and with a lot of fanfare, we said, we listened to you users, we've gotten rid of the owl forever, you'll never see him again. So the owl died after about 2 months. He still hung out in our office still, just as a reminder to us that it's okay to make mistakes sometimes, but try to minimize them. Expect the unexpected. So when I sold Zite to CNN, I expected a lot of things. I expected me to try as hard as possible to make Zite successful in CNN. And I feel like I really did that. Again, tripling the size of the team, releasing on multiple products, re-releasing the product, winning lots of awards. I was really proud of what we had done within CNN, and CNN was very happy with us. On the other hand, there's things that a big company just doesn't understand about a startup that we had to deal with. So, for example, a big media company, all they really understand in terms of valuing an asset is how much money do you contribute to the bottom line. And though that was a really successful product, we never really made a lot of money. And there are various reasons for that, which we don't need to get into, but we really didn't perform in terms of delivering revenue. Now, I had argued to everybody at CNN, hey, this asset is worth a lot of money. We've built a lot of value in this asset because we've hired really awesome people, and people are worth something. We've gotten a lot of users. Users are worth something, even if you're not monetizing them right now. But CNN's sort of patience in incubating us at some point ran out and said, hey, maybe the best thing to do is see if someone else wants to buy this. So in sort of a bizarre turn of events, we ended up selling to one of our largest competitors out of CNN. And this was kind of a shock almost to everyone involved, in the sense that typically when you sell something to a company, when you sell a startup to a company, you kind of become tainted by the company in not the best possible way. That is, people think that you suddenly become a big company and you're no longer a startup and you're no longer as nimble and smart. I remember when I met Mike McHugh, the CEO of Flipboard, and at the end of the first conversation, we said, wow, I can't believe we haven't met before because our visions were so aligned. And Flipboard has distribution and users, and we have this amazing underlying technology that they don't have. So there's just this perfect marriage. Unfortunately, this time, I had sold the company once, and sort of gone through CNN for 2 years, and it's grueling to run a company. It's especially grueling to run a company within a large company because not only are you dealing with sort of the day-to-day in the startup life, but you're also dealing with making sure that the company can be successful within the context of the larger company. So it's almost like I had two jobs. One, I was managing my team. On the other hand, I was managing up. I'm sort of convincing everybody at CNN that they had made a smart move. So I was really tired after a few years. So after selling the company once, one nice thing in this process is that I think that both Flipboard and I were honest with each other that, maybe it's best that I go try to figure out what I'm going to do next rather than, try to continue with Zite. So hence me being here right now, having a lot of time off and able to tell the story instead of working. So yes, expect the unexpected. You just never know what'll happen, but be prepared for it because opportunities are out there all over the place, and it's important to acknowledge and recognize them. So 2 more things. These sound really simple, but I think they're really important. As an entrepreneur, just be yourself. I see a lot of sort of star worship these days. Like, I want to be like Mark Zuckerberg. I want to be like so-and-so. I read his book. At the end of the day, the most important thing here is just to be yourself. Like, take your own life experiences into your startup. And I think that those are going to be much more important than any of the business books you've read. I myself, I was a philosophy major, and that has really influenced me. One of the things that it taught me was that, I don't believe in capital T truth. I believe that a lot of the truth in the world comes much more from poetry than it does from philosophy. I think that's true in business too. I think that a lot of the truth that you find in business is probably from you going on a hike, from you reading a book, from you spending time with your family and deriving a lot of pleasure out of that rather than sort of reading business books. So I think something that is often forgotten in startup culture is just kind of being yourself and remembering who you are. I think the most important thing, though, at the end of the day is having fun. I mean, if you're not having fun, then you're not in this for the right reasons. I mean, I love my team. I love going out drinking with them. I love building products with them. I love getting into the morning with them and having meetings with them. Like, every single day of Zite was awesome for me. And I think if you don't feel that in your startup, then you're missing something. I encourage you that, at the end of the day, after all this advice, after, remembering to pivot, remembering how to launch a product, be yourself and have fun, because that's what it's all about. Okay, that's all I have for you for now. Any questions, or come and find me later, but that is a brief history of Zite and the Entrepreneurial Rollercoaster.
Great. One big applause for Mark. I'm sure there are some questions. We got some time for 2 or 3 questions, so the mics are left and right. Just raise your hand and ask your question. What do you want to know? Oh, it's here at the first row.
Hey, how's it going? Be nice. Good to see you too.
Microphone?
Yeah, and I'll just repeat it.
Max?
And after it.
The question was the single biggest learning, and that's really easy. Is that I should have done this way earlier. I think that I had a lot of doubts in my life. Is like, what is the right resume to go become a CEO? What's the right resume to go build a company? What's the right resume to go to a venture capitalist and ask for cash? And frankly, I doubted myself through a lot of my career, even though, I look at my resume now and I'm like, oh, of course, I could have done that. And, I really doubted myself a lot. And I was really worried when I took this job that I would really screw this up. I thought, I've never been a CEO before. I've never managed a P&L before. I've never built a business before. I've just built a lot of products. And I realized that you can just do it. And I probably could have done it way earlier. And that if you're doubting yourself as to whether you can start a company, the right answer is to just go do it. Like, hit the ground and go see how it works. You might fail. I've had friends who failed. That's not a bad thing. You kind of need to try it before you know. I had an entrepreneur come to me just a few weeks ago. He's the sort of co-founder of a startup, and he's tired. He realized that this isn't for him. His relationship and other things are more important to him. For me, this is what I've always wanted to do, and the only thing stopping me was myself. And I think that that's just a really important lesson that I learned.
Cool. Thank you for your answer. Next question. Yeah, here in front, right?
Hi. You're a philosopher, right?
I am.
So this question goes to your heart. Do you think it is possible to be a good entrepreneur without knowing who you are? So knowing yourself. I'm talking about the good in you, what you want to do in your life and this kind of stuff.
I think you can, because I've seen examples of it, but that's not the person that I want to be. I think that, like I said, for example, when we sold the company, it was much more important for me to understand how Zite survived within CNN than how much money we were getting or negotiating the contract. And that's because I know myself really well, and I really care about the products that I work on. I just don't work on these products because that's my career. I work on them because I really believe that all the products that I've worked on help to move the world forward. So I feel like as an entrepreneur, you're just going to be more successful in the long term if you understand who you are. And I think understanding who you are means understanding your core motivations, understanding what drives you in the morning, understanding why you're working on this, like what the larger purpose of this product is. I see, we all see a lot of soulless entrepreneurs out there, but I don't think those are the people that make the best CEOs that are the role models we should be following. And I think it's a really good point that kind of knowing yourself is critical to kind of surviving all of the challenges that are going to be flying at you every day.
Thank you. The last question here.
Do you miss Zite?
Yes, every day. I mean, I'll tell you the hardest thing in the world, and I can't stress this too much, is that Zite is a product I use every single day. My mother uses Zite every single day and sends me articles from Zite every single day. So my best friends use Zite every single day and send me articles from Zite every single day. It's like I can't avoid it. And now, there's a certain sense of control you have when you're running the company, and you sort of are maybe overly confident in yourself that you'll be able to move it forward, or at least kind of what's going to be happening in the future. And now I have much less visibility into where it's going. I mean, I know that Zite's technology is going to be folded into Flipboard at some point. But frankly, there's a reason that I was at Zite instead of Flipboard, and I think that we had a much better product. And I think Flipboard understands a lot of the challenges in their current product and a lot of the advantages of Zite. And I wish them the best in moving it forward. But I tell you, it pains me every day that I'm not involved in that process, because it's the best product I've ever worked on. It's always a challenge for entrepreneurs. It's really your baby is being taken away from you. It's sort of like your kid going to college. You wish them the best, but and you know that they're doing things at parties that you wouldn't approve of. But on the other hand, it's sort of a necessary step in life.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.